Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the show. My name is Michael Rebelo. I am the host and the founder of the Before Mindset podcast. We're here live at Freedom Fest 2026, right here at the Main Street Media Network booth. I'm a 20-year-old entrepreneur who chose entrepreneurship over the traditional college path, inspired and driven by my goal to inspire and to also help middle Americans, just like my mother, pursue the path of outside the traditional playbook and retire early, and also to build long-lasting financial freedom, and also to think for themselves. And today, we have someone that's doing something that's never been done in the history of America before. We have Mike Ter Maat, who is running for the vice presidency of the Republican Party. Mike, it is a pleasure. How are you, my friend?
It's nice to be with you, Michael. I'm a big fan of those who advocate for thinking for yourself.
Absolutely.
Right? Which is what this campaign is all about. I'm seeking the Republican Party's nomination for vice president. No one's ever done this before, which is weird.
Yeah, why hasn't anybody done that before?
Because the way we choose vice presidents in the United States is stupid.
I love how straightforward it
Objectively
is.
speaking,
Yeah.
It's not an opinion, it's objective. The way that we do this, as your viewers know, is that we wait until there's a few days to go before the Republican convention or the Democratic convention, and then whoever is going to be the presidential nominee, by virtue of having won the primaries, right?
Right.
That person just unilaterally announces who the VP is going to be, who the VP...
All the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
The vice presidential nominee is going to be this person. And no
Right.
matter how bad an idea it is, everyone at the national convention is obligated to pretend like it's genius.
And they go with it.
Yeah, they go with it.
It's like, hello, do you raise your hand and say something?
It's right, it's a voice vote. So
Yeah.
everyone in favor of Kamala Harris? Sure. Everyone opposed? I don't know what happens if you say no.
Yeah.
Maybe you drop through a hole in the floor and
Right.
you're a non-person.
Or you just escort it out. I don't know, find out.
You find out.
Yeah, but nobody's going to.
So what we're advocating for is basically two things. We would like to see the Liberty Movement represented on the national ticket.
Interesting. Okay, I like
To
that.
unify the Republican Party. We believe the Republican Party is moving in a liberty-minded direction. Slowly, not fast enough, but is
Right.
moving in that direction, especially as young people join the party, right?
Definitely.
And the other thing is that we're advocating for the national delegates to choose the next vice presidential nominee, to take matters into their own hands, to signal in advance that they plan to select the next vice presidential nominee so that the presidential nominee doesn't have to go through the hassle of picking
Right.
someone and then get into a fight or something. We're not looking for chaos.
Right.
But we are looking for something more like, this is going to be painful for you to hear, more like 1956. In 1956, that was the last time one of these parties allowed the convention to pick. In the Democratic Party, the Democratic presidential nominee deferred to the convention and said to the convention, you pick the vice presidential nominee. And they did. They almost, this is a weird piece of trivia, they nearly picked John Kennedy, a very, very young senator from Massachusetts.
Wow.
They didn't. They picked someone else. 4 years later, Kennedy becomes president of the United States, in part because he became well known in that floor vote in 56. We believe that the national delegates would do a better job of picking someone than having just one person unilaterally pick. And why it's so important is because we want a more legitimate process, a more democratic process to back up the VP.
Yeah.
We believe it'd be good for the party, it'd be good for fundraising and grassroots support, and most importantly, it'd be good for governance. Whoever that VP is who wins, whether a Republican or a Democrat, we hope it's a Republican, we hope it's me,
I hope it's you too.
well, bless your heart, whoever the VP is who becomes vice president, whoever the nominee is, we want them to feel as though they've been picked by the entire party, that they're accountable to the party, not just to one person.
Right, and they're picked by the people. They're not picked automatically where it's like, oh, if I saddle with this person, if they win, let the people decide. I mean, we have the right to vote, right? Why don't you vote
Indeed,
for the
the
vice
requirement to vote.
presidency? Exactly.
They're required to vote, but
Like-
right now they just, all in favor, or opposed.
Right.
We need a serious, more legitimate vote.
Absolutely. And I want to dive in a little bit. Mike, for you, from your lens, what does liberty mean for you?
Liberty means the government getting out of our way and allowing us to make decisions for ourselves, right? And it also means something else. that I grew into feeling over the decades, right? Because where I started on my liberty journey was, I want the government to get out of my way, less taxes, less spending our money. We need to make decisions for ourselves because those decisions are better. That's where I started. But I have grown into a recognition that there's another side to it. And it goes something like this. Let me try this on. Of all the weird things I'm going to say today, let this be the weirdest. Imagine that socialism works. Imagine that all of our people like me, a conservative economist, right, from the George Washington University, imagine that we're all wrong. And this is a thought experiment, right? Yep. We all know that we make better decisions when the government gets out of our way. But imagine that the opposite were true. Imagine that the government really could make decisions for you that were better than the decisions you could make for yourself. Imagine the government was so dang smart and that we were so dang stupid. The latter might be easier to believe. I really do some dumb things in my personal life, to be honest.
You never know.
I like to defer to my wife, Nancy, with important decisions, right? But I don't like to defer to the federal government. But imagine that the federal government could make decisions for us that were better than the decisions we would make. Here's the big question. Would it be ethical? Would it be appropriate? Would it be a good idea to defer to the government and allow them to make these decisions, knowing that the government could do a better job of it? And the answer must be no. That it is not only our right to make decisions, even if they're the wrong ones, even if I do dumb stuff once in a while. I know none of your viewers do dumb things.
Right.
But I do.
I do.
Okay, the two of us do, but no one watching or listening to us.
Yeah.
No one else makes dumb decisions.
All right, nobody do anything dumb.
Nobody do anything dumb. Good advice right there.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, good advice right there. It's not only our right, but it is in some sense our obligation. I was raised by this will be odd also. I was raised by a Lutheran and a Calvinist. And so there's a little bit of tension between your exercise of free will and your obligation to find the path that God wants you to find that's already out there.
Right.
And I believe it is our obligation to find that path. Whether it doesn't have to be a Christian perspective, but I do believe that if you're not working hard at making decisions for yourself and for your family, right, and for each other, for your community, if you're not making decisions for yourself and working at that, you are in some sense letting down yourself, your spouse, your family, your community, your family, right? You're letting down the way that it should be. Our society only advances culturally and economically, but we only advance because we make decisions for ourselves, sometimes goofy ones.
Yep. I love that. And thank you for sharing that. There's so many definitions of liberty, but the one that you just described to me is probably the most that I resonate with, because we absolutely have the obligation and the right to think freely and to have the right to say yes and no, and to also provide for ourselves. And maybe we ask the government a couple of things, but we, the people, we have the right and the freedom and the obligation to be on our own with a little bit of governance, but we don't need the government to overreach into our cookie jar of lives to go, oh, I want to do this. But no, back off. I had Topher Field actually on the show this morning, and he was saying the exact same thing of there's the government's just trying to sneak their way in, go out the back door, please. You walked in, you didn't even take your shoes off, and you didn't even rang the doorbell into my life, and you're like, well, I'm going to come in and start fixing things. No, like you said, let us stumble, let us skin our knees and figure it out on our own.
And there is a tension because so often we recognize that we want to do things of what I'll call, as an economist, a communal nature. There are some things that are easier to do as a group.
Yep.
By the way, that doesn't mean you want the government to do it.
That's true.
Right? And if you do decide you want a government to do it, if you decide that government is the vehicle of choice for doing things as a group, fine. But it has to be done at as localized a level as possible, right? And that is, to your point, how the government invites itself in. So, I was a cop for 11 and a half years. As an example. Pardon me?
Thank you for what you did.
Oh, my goodness. It was an honor. I almost said a pleasure. Pleasure might be an exaggeration, but it was definitely an honor.
Yeah.
Imagine if your local community decides, as I think you have the right to do, that you want a criminal code. You want to be able to hold people accountable, and the best way to do that is to pool resources, to coordinate a little bit through your community, right? It would be hard to pull off a criminal code and courts and everything without some communal structure, right?
Yes.
Whether you call that a government or not, I don't know, but you need some pooling of resources. Okay, that's one thing. But then for the government to say, well, now that we're in this business, right?
Right.
Now we're going to start kicking in doors.
Oh, yeah.
And exercising warrants that we wrote in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
We're going to start bugging your
ChatGPT.
phone. Right. We're going to use ChatGPT to track you down. We're going to look inside your ChatGPT, which is creepy. That's where we get into trouble, because we invite the government in to do certain things, and then it becomes difficult to hold that firewall.
That's true. And I kind of want to dive in a little bit. You're also an economist, and the economy
I don't say mean things to you. Why would you say such a mean thing to me?
An economist in a good way, if that's not an oxymoron. But anyway, I kind of want to dive into what your lens is with the economy right now. There's a lot that's happening with the war in Iran. The ceasefire's over, and we're back to doing what we did, I think, a couple of weeks ago, maybe even longer than that.
Right.
You've seen the oil prices
and
start
10
to go
years
up.
ago, and 20 years ago, and 30 years ago, and when I was growing up in
pendulum.
Vietnam. Right.
Exactly.
Right.
And I kind of want to get your perspective on where the economy is heading right now for Americans. Middle Americans, doesn't matter. But where are we going with this? What are you seeing right now?
The fundamental economy is strong. But we are about to go through some things that are going to be difficult to go through.
Yep.
That doesn't necessarily look like a recession. You know, we can avoid a recession. Recessions are unavoidable. You know, we will have a recession. We don't know when, as they say. But just as importantly, even if we don't go through a recession anytime soon, we're going to go through some difficult periods of adjustment, in no small part due to AI. You know, when people say jobs are going to be replaced and jobs are going to change, that is true. That is true. That doesn't mean mass unemployment. But it does mean that a lot of people are going to lose their job, have to find another job, right? So you may see periods where unemployment is higher than it is today. Today it remains quite low. But you may see periods where we go through adjustments, as we do with major technological shifts. Folks in your audience with any gray hair remember what we went through, you know, in the 80s with computers, in the 90s with the internet.
Yeah, the dot-com bubble, all of that.
Yeah, you know, it was tough.
Yeah.
It was tough. And people talk about the AI revolution being even tougher. That may well be.
Yeah.
It may be even tougher.
Maybe even different kind of tough.
And maybe all tough comes in different flavors, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
You know, and before that, you know, I well remember going through the 80s, we had a bad recession that was just California. We had a bad recession that was in the Rust Belt when we stopped making automobiles in Detroit, right?
That's right.
We go through these adjustments that are very, very difficult. And so I don't want to minimize the fact that even if we don't go through a recession, we have some tough times ahead. And then the other two things I would worry about, you brought up Iran. We seem to have a foreign policy almost no matter who the president of the United States is, right? Democrat, Republican, young, old, skinny, heavy, right? Black, white, probably male, female.
Yep.
You know, I'm totally willing to spin the wheel on a woman as president. I'm looking forward to that someday. But you know, it just seems like no matter who is president, we have a foreign policy that likes war.
Yes.
That likes war. That might be an overly simplistic statement. You know, I don't think people actually like war, but are certainly too tolerant of it for our taste.
I agree.
And one of the things I worry about is that we are too tolerant of war, not only for our preference, but for our finances and for our safety. In other words, I worry that all of these interventions that we get into, each one is very unlikely to end in a nuclear exchange, in a world war, and all hellfire all over the world, and we melt down, and Chicago gets vaporized. But let's say the chances of that happening because of one of these, it's not zero. Don't tell me it's zero, because you could be intervening in Iran or anywhere else in the Middle East or anywhere in Africa.
Absolutely.
And end up pissing off the Chinese, pissing off the Russians, and all of a sudden it's on like Donkey Kong.
Hitting the wrong nerve, yep.
You hit a wrong nerve. So it's not zero possibility. Imagine it's, let me make up a number. Let me say it's 1 in 50 is the chances of winding up in something that's really difficult to get out of.
Yep.
Right? That either ends up in, God forbid, a nuclear exchange, or winds up in a negotiation that looks really bad for us because we're trying to avoid a nuclear exchange. Imagine that, 1 in 50 chance. That sounds like you could tolerate it, right?
Yeah.
Now let me say we're going to do it 50 times. Now how do you feel about 1 in 50?
Not too great.
Not too great. And I feel like we've been whistling past the graveyard.
Yeah.
You know, we got out of Vietnam without going into a hot war directly on the Chinese mainland.
Yep.
Right? We had troops shooting at each other, but we didn't, you know, it didn't get out of hand. We got out of Korea without it getting completely out of hand.
Right.
But I worry if we had those fights today, what
It'd
that
be a
looks
lot
like.
worse.
It'd be a lot worse because
Yeah.
the Chinese aren't putting up with our crap anymore.
Nope.
What happens, you know, in Iraq and Iran and in Iraq and Afghanistan? As bad as they were, they could have been worse. We
That's
got
true.
out by the skin of our teeth.
Yep.
Trillions of dollars lost, over 1 million lives lost. So this is obviously nothing but an abject failure.
Yes.
But we didn't wind up in a nuclear exchange. We didn't wind up in ceding sovereignty. But I
The
feel
latter
like
could have been much worse.
it could have been much, much worse. And therefore I worry about Iran.
Yeah.
Iran may be a war that was difficult to avoid, that was always one we were eventually going to get into. I don't know. But the way we got into it, in my view, is unacceptable. To get into it without Congress being involved, without allies being involved,
Right.
without giving negotiations enough time. And everyone knows that when you negotiate with the Iranians, it takes years.
Oh, yeah.
They're duplicitous, they're dishonest,
Right. And
they're
switch up.
complex,
Yeah. It's just.
and they drag it out.
Yeah.
You can't do that in 6 weeks, right?
You can. No.
President Obama found that out.
Yeah. We found it the hard way.
He found out the hard way, and he was pulling his hair out. I mean, good for him for trying.
Yeah.
You know, I appreciate that. The deal that he cut was not very good. He did avoid a war. You know, good on him. We'll give him a C.
Yep.
But it is hard, and you need to go into these things knowing it's going to be hard. And then the other thing I worry about is the implications for our finances. We are on a path. You brought up the abject insult that I'm an economist. I did work for the White House Office of Management and Budget in 1991 before campaigning for the Bush Quayle campaign in 92. I can tell you, and there's no reasonable economist who would disagree with what I'm going to say. We are on a path toward a default on the federal government's debt eventually. We don't know when. The debate is this a 5-year problem or a 25-year problem?
It's a question of when.
It's a question of when. It's not a 40-year problem, okay?
No.
It's 5 to 25.
Yep.
That's bad. And the reason it's bad is because we're not talking about, you know, the Commonwealth of Virginia failing, and we're not talking about, with all due respect to my home state, and we're not talking about, you know, the nation of France failing, with all due respect to our friends in Paris. We're talking about something much more important, because the basis of the world economy is the U.S. dollar.
Yes.
If the American federal government defaults on debt, not only does the bond market collapse, but the U.S. dollar market collapses, and all of a sudden it becomes very difficult to engage in international transactions, and you have a worldwide depression, not recession, that's very difficult to get out of, because the American economy has always been the engine to get us out of worldwide recessions. That's a very dark scenario, much darker than what we've experienced in the last 100 years. I worry about that very much, and I worry about that being a one-way street. You know, how do you come back from rebuilding the institutions, rebuilding the trust? This is to be avoided. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we have the domestic policy or the foreign policy to avoid it.
Mike, thank you so much for sharing. And how can people follow you and follow your mission and also to support you as much as they can?
Well, I appreciate that. It's actually a big secret. We don't allow people to support us. We don't give out the website. I'm kidding, of course. Our website is MikeTerMaat.com, which is tricky because it's hard to spell. The Mike part is pretty easy, the M-I-K-E part. You probably learned how to spell that yourself. But we go by Mike, right? I've heard people call you Mike and call you Michael both. You got that going on.
Yeah, that's
I'm
true.
proud of you.
Thank you.
My mother's the only one that calls. What does your mother call you?
Michael.
My mother calls me Michael as well. MikeTerMaat.com. Termaat is T-E-R-M-A-A-T, double A, because it's Dutch. And at MikeTerMaat.com, you'll see my contact information. Reach out to me at Mike@MikeTerMaat.com. I think you can actually track down my phone number if you work at it. And we've got a big donut button in the upper right-hand corner. So if anyone wants a donut, I don't know actually how that function works, but you hit that red button in the upper right-hand corner. I'm told good things happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it from Mike himself. If you want to learn more about Mike and his mission and also his campaign as well, you can check the video description below and the podcast description to follow him and also to reach out to him and give them as much support as possible. Ladies and gentlemen, build yourself better and bigger every day. Live better, live bigger, always move forward. Thank you so much for listening in, and I hope you got inspired because I certainly did. Mike, I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much. It's a real joy to be with you. Thank you so much.
So thank you so much.
Thank you. Good to be with you.